Thank you, Karen, for that. I mentioned to Karen this morning that I'm so grateful for her courage. She's one of those people that's willing to raise her hand and say things that are hard to hear sometimes. And so many of you are that way here, which makes for a healthy family, right? That's right. I also want to acknowledge that on day 3 of a training like this that feels like a marathon sometimes, 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., we're using different muscles than we do when we teach class, right? Probably more of our seat muscles than the bottom of our sole feet muscles, right? And I know that many of you have big, important things going on at home. And that you have hard battles that you're fighting at home. And that these principles that we're talking about are deep and deep water and dense. And that we can go home sometimes and feel like it's hard to implement them in the whirlwind of those battles. But how I respect what teachers do to inspire others, even as they are trying to keep those battles at home in check and in balance. On Monday, there was about 30 minutes that we gave to the presenters because of some extra needed time there. It was to be the section on emphasis for the upcoming year. And with Rowan being ill this morning and having Karen read his, we had just a few minutes, and I thought I would do that now. We thought we might do it at the faculty retreat, but it's difficult sometimes to get everyone at the same time at the faculty retreat, which I hope you'll all enjoy, by the way, on Friday. How many have not been to Nuns Park or Bridalveil Falls? Hopefully most of you have been there, but it's a beautiful place. We'll take a walk. We'll do some things on that bike trail there and others. Priorities for the upcoming year, and I think we've laid a foundation for some of the opportunities that are coming as a school, as well as some of the storms that are coming for our country and for our communities, right? Here will be our priorities, or at least these, I shouldn't say they will be. These are some of the focus areas that are on my mind and in my heart, and I just wanted to share them with you. The board, of course, will refine these, but these will certainly be part of that conversation. Number 1, and some of these might sound familiar to you. Priorities don't change that much institutionally too quickly, but number 1, mission, people. You probably could have guessed that one, right? Attract and maintain mission people as we grow. People who love liberty, are self-governed according to our mission, like you. You want freedom to teach. We want to give it to you. And we will. So long as you and I continue to be worthy of the trust that must attend that kind of freedom. So if you think about the Arbinger pyramid that we talked about yesterday and those relationship models, at the very base, the foundation of it all, is sanctifying ourselves, right? Loving God with all of our heart and soul and mind, so that we may love the children, love the parents, love our families, love our communities. That's number 1. Attract and maintain mission people. Number 2, these are going to sound familiar as well. Clean culture, consent, and consistency. And as important as these were last year, they become even more important this coming year. Think about cleanliness for just a minute. Think about what it implies to have a stewardship culture, especially as we have 50 to maybe 100 more students. we've talked about some ways that we will actually give personal stewardship responsibility to some of you and some of your classes for an individual bathroom this coming year. There might even be some compensation involved there. But hoping that you will teach the principles to your classes and to your hallways of personal stewardship. Wouldn't it be wonderful? We talked yesterday about some of the implicit institutional perceptions that may arise about American heritage as we grow, as we become more prominent in the community. You know, some of this perception of pride. How do we counteract that? Wouldn't it be something if we were known as the school where students clean their own bathrooms? How about that public perception? I wouldn't mind that one bit. You'd probably have every mother in the land saying, I want my child at that school. Consent, gaining the consent of the learner, even as we have more of them and we want more of them. And consistency. As we grow, consistency becomes even more important, doesn't it? Training, training, training. You've probably felt a step up with our foundations training, not just our materials, but the preparation that we put into it. And we're hoping that you will model that same kind of consistency and preparation for your devotionals as you cultivate the hearts of these additional students and the returning ones. Consistency. Foundations first and always. Rob, I thought that was a beautiful example of your going into Mrs. Updike's classroom and realizing how important foundations can be and what it can do to open the heart as a highway to the mind. It was just, that's an illustration that I will never forget when we're talking about foundations, right? Okay, and then finally, unity amidst change. And I like the word improvement better than change, because change for change's sake can be a little bit of a goose chase, to use an aphorism that we played with yesterday, right? Sometimes it's better to be unified than to be right. And yesterday afternoon we talked about how it feels to feel right when people don't see it, right? Cognitive dissonance. And by the way, was there anyone that came away from yesterday afternoon's conversation about cognitive bias feeling like, okay, so I have blind spots. I know that about myself. Therefore what? Anyone feel that way? Or maybe even some feelings of guilt or inadequacy? I want you to know that you are sufficient. If you weren't, you wouldn't be here. The Lord wouldn't have given you a calling and a family, and you are sufficient. But knowing thyself is just as important as coming to know God and our neighbors. And certainly is part of that second great commandment, right? To love thy neighbor as thyself. Loving yourself and knowing yourself is part of that. And that understanding our blind spots is that painful scrub brush of humility. Carl Jung said one time that we spend the better part of the first 2 decades of, he was a psychologist, the better part of the first 2 decades of our life we spend as parents building up the ego of our children, helping them to be confident and to have poise. This is important, right? And then it takes almost the rest of our life, if not the entire rest of our life, to go into our deep inner self and break down that ego. Isn't that interesting? It's a kind of yin and yang that is so much a part of our dual mortal nature. So unity amidst change. Sometimes it's better to be unified than right. We are all right in our own minds. It's far easier to do that and be unified, which is the very difficult notion of love, patience, and respect for each other when change is happening. And we might disagree about preferences or strategy, but let's not disagree about our love for each other. It's going to get a little tight around here for the next 24 months. And that's when character really rises to the surface, isn't it? When there's a little bit of pressure and heat. Well, like I said yesterday, I'm honored to be a part of this group as we go through a little bit of pressure and heat, which does wonderful things. It produces diamonds, doesn't it? Part of me yearns for that kind of experience that was had by some of the founders of this school who went through pressure and heat to create the character that they have that laid the foundation for what we're doing now. We're going to feel some of that ourselves in a bit of a different echelon, right? And I hope that we'll be grateful for it, as much as it might stretch us. So thank you. And blessings to each of you as we move forward into this very exciting chapter of the upcoming school year. We'll talk a little bit more about some of these emphases as we go forward. Okay, well, I'm going to turn the microphone back to Liz, maybe for an introduction.
Thank you, Grant.